All right, I think we're live. Namaste and welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. I'm Roshan Karyappa. I have with me Abhishek Paul as well to run you through the news and events of the week that was. Our friend Nirav Kanodra is missing today, sadly, but he will be back shortly. You will see him on a couple of episodes next week. Hey, Abhishek, enjoying the lovely Bangalore weather?
Hey, Carrie. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit too wet for my liking, but yeah, it's still good.
Well, that's been the case all through the year, actually, right? I mean, we've had exceptional weather, even by Bangalore standards, I should say. But it's starting to gnaw a little bit at my head right now. I mean, every
The
time we
good
go out,
thing
it's
is even Pune is wet, so they can't really tease us.
yeah, of course. I mean, it's been pretty crazy there as well. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
some unpleasant sights on the roads and whatnot with flooding and automobiles being stuck and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, let's hope things improve. So plenty to discuss this week. We'll take you through a roundup of the Nobel Prize winners. Of course, the Indian National Congress will have a new leader on Monday, and then speaking of elections, China's Xi Jinping is due to be re-elected today, and that is Sunday. Right. We also had INS Arihant launch a ballistic missile, right? And we'll discuss the nuances of that. And of course, who can forget the Wire's very dubious report on an alleged BJP Meta link, right? That has since been, I should say, debunked on Twitter many times over, right? So all of this and more on the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Of course, if it's the first time you're listening to the podcast, please do subscribe to us for more content on politics, policy, and culture focused on India. We put out a couple of episodes every week, and we bring you very diverse perspectives. If you've been a fan of the podcast, please rate and review us so more people can discover us. It certainly helps us, motivates us to put out more content. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. Uh, Last week we had a very interesting episode. This was a conversation with the author Hindol Sengupta. And as someone who had followed Srila Prabhupada's journey and also ISKCON for a while now, I mean, this was a wonderful conversation. It's a very inspiring story of this man, I mean, who at 70 years old, right, goes to New York and starts, perhaps one of the biggest religious organizations in the world, ISKCON, right? Again, Hindol has a knack of bringing these stories out. I mean, his previous book was on Sardar Patel, right? And definitely do check out this episode if you haven't. It's a wonderful episode. I've ordered my copy of the book. Hopefully, it should be here today, and I'm really excited to read it. Uh, all right, beginning with the first piece of news for this week. The Indian National Congress is all set to elect a new president this week on 17th of October. The frontrunners for this race are Mallikarjun Kharge and Shashi Tharoor. This will be the first time in over 2 decades the Congress party will have a non-Gandhi president. The Congress presidential polls will be held by a secret ballot, meaning that absolutely no one will get to know who voted for whom, in order to ensure a level playing field for the candidates. However, on Thursday, Shashi Tharoor lamented that some leaders had openly supported Kharge and had held meetings in his favor. And this, he said, disturbed the level playing field as such. Abhishek, we've been following these elections with some anticipation for a while now, right? I mean, do you think it will actually make a difference? And also, who do you have your money on?
Yeah, so I think the consensus right now seems to be that it is more likely that Mr. Kharge will be the winner, and that too pretty comfortably. Although we can't really say that for sure till we get the results. I think the common sentiment right now is that even if unofficially and unsaid, Mr. Kharge has the blessings of the Gandhi family, and therefore, more of the party machinery is working on, getting him elected. So I was listening to a couple of interviews by each of them given in the last few days, right? And so Mr. Tharoor, for example, was still saying that he believes that the election will be free and fair, etc. But after saying that, he was also laying down some of his complaints, right? Like, for example, he was saying that The voter list of the members who will be voting does not have, updated contact numbers, and there are some errors or omissions in that. And so he's, unable to reach them via phone and WhatsApp and all that, right? So he was kind of blaming the process and the things around it without really, or he cannot really afford to outrightly say that, he is being targeted, or he is being, Mr. Kharge is being favored. He also, as you said, like whenever he goes to meet, Congress members at a particular location, the bigwigs of that location conveniently disappear, right? So that, he is not able to meet them. So those kind of things are some things Tharoor or his camp have been saying. As far as Mr. Kharge goes, like he's playing like the classical, Manmohan Singh style congressman, right? Who says that, I was not interested in the post. It's just that people have asked me to, run for it, and I am just obliging them and, fulfilling my obligations. So, yeah, I think broadly speaking, looks like the deck is stacked against Shashi Tharoor, and Mr. Kharge should emerge a winner quite easily. As far as his changes, as you said, what do we see in the future? I think Mr. Kharge said basically that, look, for him, his manifesto is the Udaipur declaration that happened a few months back, right? Where basically what it means is that he's taking the status quo position, right? So the Udaipur declaration basically said that, XYZ committees and subcommittees need to be formed, and these will then advise and explore, etc., etc. So a typical sort of bureaucratic way of continuing to run the Congress, which will remain under the control of the top family there, right? So one thing, of course, what they're doing is the Rahul Gandhi Bharat Jodo Yatra. So maybe that's something new that they have done. But anything new that will happen will continue to happen with the blessings of Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, is what I feel. And in that way, I don't see too much of a change happening with Mr. Kharge at the helm.
Yeah, I was trying to look at the past presidents from the south, right? I mean, there is Neelam Sanjeev Reddy, and there is Nijalingappa. And so, I mean, I think if Mr. Kharge becomes the president, he'll probably be the third or fourth person to be the president, from the south, right? I mean, again, my facts may be wrong. So please correct me if you think someone else is there.
Wasn't Mr. Kamraj one of the presidents, or maybe?
Yeah, possibly, yes. Yeah.
I'm just quickly checking.
No. Yeah,
okay.
He was. Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he might be the fourth one.
Yeah, he might be the fourth person, I think. Well,
or Kamraj was not allowed to be. Something had happened, right? There's some
no, but he is listed as a president.
He was in 64, 64 to 67.
Yeah.
Correct.
But this, this non-Gandhi president as such, is there a larger significance to that? Does it signal a change in the Congress party's functioning?
Look, I mean,
or do you
think
we are trying to read too much into it?
No, some of it is the demand for change, because they have lost 2 general elections and so many state elections consecutively, right, since 2014, right? And probably the party has been in shambles for even before that, right? Let's say the UPA 2 era onwards. And so I think some of it is basically a signaling thing that, look, we are trying to show that, we are doing things different. It is also one of the traits of both Rahul Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi that they try to show that, they are selfless and above party posts, etc. Right? So all that is fine, but I think anyone who sort of follows Indian politics with a little bit of seriousness will know that the Gandhi family, end of the day, remains the glue around which this party revolves, right? Without that, the party will basically fall apart and become multiple regional
You're
parties, right?
Abhishek,
So
you're disappointing all the Tharurians. Come on, not so early in the morning.
yeah. So yeah, I think I mean that is a fact, right? That the party revolves around the Gandhis, and without them, they'll fall apart. So on that sense, nothing much is to change. If any change has to come, it has to come, with a change in the mindset and the workings of especially Rahul Gandhi, right? Like he's the clear leader of the party now, whatever other folks might say. So one of the funniest things I heard this week was there was a reporter who asked Mr. Kharge that, will you be the PM candidate if you become the president of the Congress party? So he said there is a saying that he repeats often that Bakrid mein bachenge to Muharram mein nachenge, right? And I really laughed a lot listening to that. So at least he has
uh,
a good sense of humor, is what I can say.
yeah, and I think he's pushing 80, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, he's 80 years old.
yeah, I mean, whatever you can say about politicians, one thing I think you should appreciate is the amount of hard work and hustle that they have, right?
Yeah,
That is something to take inspiration from for the rest of us, I suppose, right? Uh, all right, moving on. The Nobel Prize winners have been declared, and I'm just going to run you through a few of these folks. In physiology and medicine, we have Professor Swante Pabo. I hope I'm getting that name pronunciation right. And the prize was awarded for the discovery of the genetic identity of two of humankind's earliest ancestors, and also opening a new window on the human evolution process. The Nobel Prize on Literature goes to Annie Ernaux for the courage and clinical acuity with which she uncovers the roots in estrangements and collective restraints of personal memory. Wow. Um, and then for the Peace Prize, we have Ales Bielatsky. Okay. Uh, Probably butchering half these names, but sorry in advance. And this person is from the Organization Memorial and Organization Center for Civil Liberties. And this is the prize was awarded for promoting the right to criticize power and protect the fundamental rights of citizens, for showing outstanding efforts to document war crimes, human rights abuses, and the abuse of power. Uh, the Nobel Prize in Physics has been shared by three folks: Alain Aspect, John Clauser, Anton Zellinger. And this is for conducting experiments in quantum mechanics that laid the groundwork for rapidly developing new applications in computing and cryptography. Um, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry is as well shared by three folks: Caroline Bertozzi, Morten Meldal, Barry Sharpless. And this is for the development of click chemistry and bioorthogonal chemistry. Abhishek, do any of these subjects seem familiar? I mean, like vaguely reminiscent of a time we used to look at physics and chemistry textbooks?
yeah, definitely not for me. Like for me, the
Yeah.
only interesting one was the Nobel Prize for Ben Bernanke, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
given his infamous role in the financial crisis. So
Yeah, I was just about to read that out. So the Nobel Prize in Economics has been shared by Ben Bernanke, Douglas Diamond, Philip Dwybig, right? And this is for the research on banking and financial crisis. There's a little bit of irony in there, for those of us who, have studied or have seen Mr. Bernanke's part in the 2008 financial crisis. But I think the former chief economic advisor made a very good point, right? That I think the Nobel Prize in economics is considered from an academic perspective and doesn't really, count real world as such, right? And one can argue if the impact of such a thing, right? But yeah, I mean, this is pretty interesting. In fact, the Nobel Prize in economics was a late addition, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was added in the
yeah,
70s. Originally, I think it was just the five other categories, right? So the Nobel Prize is also, I think, one of those weird situations where you can have two people saying exactly the opposite things getting a Nobel Prize, right? In economics. So, which is again one of the weird quirks of that discipline. Right, we wish all of the prize winners hearty congratulations, and hopefully they produce more and more amazing work in the years to come. Moving on, the INS Arihant has launched a submarine ballistic missile. The Ministry of Defense announced on Friday, October 14th, that the indigenous ballistic missile nuclear submarine INS Arihant had successfully launched a nuclear-capable submarine ballistic missile SLBM in the Bay of Bengal with, to quote, very high accuracy. The SLBM was launched from the country's first indigenous strategic strike nuclear submarine INS Arihant. The test is significant for the nuclear ballistic submarine or SSBN program, which is a crucial element of India's nuclear deterrence capability. The development of these capabilities is important in the light of India's relations with China and Pakistan, with China having deployed many of its submarines, including some that are nuclear powered and nuclear capable. India's capacity building on the nuclear powered submarines and of the nuclear capable missile, which can be launched from them, is crucial for nuclear deterrence. This comes at a very interesting time, right, Abhishek? I mean, when there are all kinds of models being played out on whether Russia will escalate this Ukraine situation to a nuclear war. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, India, I think, still continues to have this no first strike policy, which means it is important for us to demonstrate a great second strike capability, right? And so for that, uh, the capability of having, ballistic missile launch capability from a submarine is crucial, right? That completes the nuclear triad. That is, we have capability of launching nuclear missiles from air, land, or water now, right? And yeah, I think obviously INS Arihant itself is a great achievement of India's scientists and engineers, and obviously having a nuclear submarine. Firstly, it's a nuclear powered submarine, and also with this capability of launching ballistic missiles, so makes it like India's most potent, I would say, sea, naval weapon. And I think we have one more almost ready, right? INS Arighat, which is right now currently undergoing testing, I believe, and it's expected to be fully operational very soon. We have one more in being manufactured, and one more in the pipeline. So maybe in about 3, 4, maybe 5 years, we'll have 4 of these INS Arihant class submarines available for India. So yeah, I think definitely a very strong signal on this front by the Navy and the government, right? That India was able to successfully test this in the Bay of Bengal this week. And yeah, kudos to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic achievement. Right. I think this whole naval power and military prowess as such, right? I mean, I think it deserves an episode of its own. We should probably get defense analyst, expert, perhaps an ex-army person, for a
Yeah, I
long-ranging conversation on
mean,
this.
there have been interesting developments this year as well, right? With
Correct.
a
Yeah.
new aircraft carrier as well as this current thing. So yeah, definitely deserves some expert analysis.
Yep. All right. Moving on. There is another election happening just outside of our borders. The Chinese Communist Party's 20th Congress is opening today, which is 16th October, in Beijing with 2,296 delegates representing the party's estimated 90 million members. Xi Jinping is poised to clinch a historic third 5-year leadership term for himself, the only leader to do it after Mao Zedong. The biggest reshuffle, however, will be to his cabinet. Some notable names to look out for are, again, I think I'm going to butcher these names, but Li Keqiang, Lee currently holds the premier position and is expected to step down at the annual parliamentary session in March because of the rules that limit him to 2 5-year terms. After stepping down from the country's number 2 post, Lee may exit politics completely or even stay as the parliament's chief. Wang Yang, the chairman of China's People's Political Consultative Conference, CPPCC, is a leading contender for the premier position. He is ranked 4th on the Politburo Standing Committee, PSC. Hu Chunhua, who the vice premier of China, is a key candidate for elevation to the PSC and may also become the country's next premier. Well, Li Qiang, one of Xi's closest allies and party secretary of Shanghai. Li is also considered a candidate for elevation to the PSC. Ding Shuxiang, she is key aide. Ding is the director of the general office of the Communist Party and is also a contender for the PSC. And we have a few others as well. Well, this election is coming at a very, very interesting time for Xi Jinping, right? I mean, famously in 2018, he amended the constitution to basically get rid of the 2-term limit that I think Deng Xiaoping had imposed, right? And so potentially after Mao, Xi Jinping could be, the next leader who could potentially rule China for life, right? And if you look at the entire positioning as well, right? I mean, they're positioning this as the Mao era, right? Where there was some sort of a resurgence or, the new era, whatever they call it, right? And then after that, there was the Deng Xiaoping era where China became prosperous. And then you have the Xi era, right? I mean, at least that's how Xi is sort of looking at it. And slowly, I think the Deng Xiaoping era is being squeezed out, right? Xi Jinping has clearly said that by 2049 he wants to see China as the superpower of the world, right? And they're certainly working towards it. I mean, if you look at whatever's happened over the course of the last 5-10 years, whether it's the Belt and Road Initiative or whether it's causing trouble in Hong Kong, Taiwan, etc., I think China has made it very, very clear that they have highly internationalist tendencies, right? And this is coming at a weird time in China, especially, right? I mean, we've seen the last couple of years has been massive unrest, right? I mean, of course, there was COVID, and the zero COVID policy isn't helping for sure, right? But then you also had a crackdown on all of the businesses and everything, right? I mean, the billionaires were made to toe the line, right? And the thriving startup ecosystem has since been destroyed, right? Multiple sectors, whether it's real estate or education or tech or whatever, all of them have been fairly regulated right now, and just to perhaps show that who's the boss, right? So that their power doesn't exceed the party power as such. So it really is it's coming at a very weird time in history for Xi Jinping, I would say, right? And it'll be interesting how this pans out going further. And I think from their perspective, they have bigger fish to fry than like a border dispute between India, I think, at least at this point of time, right? I mean, there is plenty happening with the whole Russia-Ukraine situation, then the Taiwan situation and whatnot. There was an interesting article in the Nikkei, perhaps we'll link to it in the description, where the argument was that Xi Jinping has played his hand, right, and has made it very, very clear to everyone that that China has this tendency for for international domination, right? I mean, really, I mean, that's not a good place for someone to be in, where everyone can recognize a common enemy, whether it's the West, Europe, anywhere, right? So yeah, I mean, it's I'm curious to understand what this will mean for India. Abhishek, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think China's it's always difficult to predict what the Chinese actions will be, right? I think one news item which probably we are missing out is I think President Biden has laid out some very stringent norms on the semiconductor industry and engineers and so on, right? Basically saying that you can't be uh, working in China in this sector and something like that. I was just starting to read that. So, and so that is probably one of these areas of conflict that we will see, right? With, what happens, especially with, Taiwan in the picture now, right? The future of so many industries would be at stake if the semiconductor pipeline manufacturing is sort of disrupted, right? It's almost hard to imagine. So
Yeah, I
yeah, I
would take
think,
that with a
yeah,
pinch of salt. I mean, I saw the thread and then I saw some subsequent stories as well. I would kind of take that with a pinch of salt because, see, China has been stockpiling this stuff for like ages now, 2, 3 years, right? And for me, I mean, I find it a little hard to believe that they would not have the IP or the know-how, and that they're depending on American executives, right?
right, yeah.
So I think that is a little hard to believe,
No, I am not
right?
saying that. I am saying that in
Yeah.
case there is a war with Taiwan,
Hmm.
in that case, the disruption could be immense. I'm not
Yeah,
saying the
absolutely.
executives will have an impact right now.
No,
Yeah,
no, absolutely, absolutely. I think you know we did that whole episode on the semiconductor
yeah,
industry and how important it is, right? I mean, with Gaurav and Arun. Again, we'll link to it in the podcast description. Do check that out as well. Fairly fascinating. Talks about the supply chain mechanics and what is the current situation here in India, and the impact going forward as well. But that could be a real problem for sure. I agree with you on that.
yeah. The other thing is, I think it's still not clear in terms of the succession planning for Xi Jinping, right? And
Yeah.
so one of the things that people feel is that in the Chinese military, right, there are various generals and leaders who are often jostling for power, right, to show that
Hmm.
they are at the top. And so one of the risks people have said is that if one of these generals starts a conflict somewhere, could be India, could be Taiwan, without even getting a full buy-in from Xi Jinping, right? And so that is always a risk with China, given the ambitions that these generals and leaders have in terms of their positioning to become the next leader of the military or the party, right? So that is also something which is quite worrying. On the Russia front, obviously, I think the last few weeks haven't gone too well for Russia, is what I understand reading from reports. Of course, the reports could be all biased, right? Given we tend to get very one-sided view from the media that we consume, but in general, it looks like Russia is kind of struggling right now, and so again, it I don't know what, let's say a Russian, let's say a defeat or withdrawal, what that signals to China in terms of their ambitions is also something which is interesting, right? I mean, for all we know, it could mean that they temper their expectations for Taiwan. Conversely, it could mean they accelerate their timelines, right? Saying that, we need to act sooner before the West is able to, refocus back to Taiwan after Ukraine. So it is very hard to predict, I would say.
Yeah, it is. I was listening to this Economist podcast with Kevin Rudd, who is a former Australian Prime Minister,
Yeah.
and seems like a pretty interesting guy as well, right? I mean, speaks Mandarin very fluently,
So
and
funny thing is, a lot of these Australian former
yeah,
PMs and deputy PMs have all become podcasters. So
yeah,
I have seen two or three
very,
different.
very interesting,
Yeah.
a very interesting perspective. So, I mean, he apparently got his PhD in in Xi Jinping, right,
Wow.
at Oxford or something of that sort. And he was talking about the first time he met the person, and he says that Xi Jinping was the first person who spoke without a note in hand, right? First Chinese politician he saw that just spoke extempore, right? I mean, it's amazing. So he also says that the chance of accidental war right now is immense, right? I mean, he says
That's
the
what I
most,
was, saying, right? That who
yeah,
suddenly starts a conflict, you never know.
yeah, exactly, He says the most amount of metal flowing in the air, something like that, right? Right. Well, I mean, very interesting times. I mean, I just hope and pray that things don't come to a head in any of these places, and saner minds prevail. Well, moving on to some lighthearted stuff right now. We had this case of The Wire reporting on an alleged BJP and Meta link. And there was a lot of controversy around that. In an article published on October 10th, 2022, titled, "If BJP's Amit Malviya reports your post, Instagram will take it down, no questions asked." Meta's head of communications, Andy Stone, has since dismissed the story and stated that it is based on fabricated documents. However, the Wire did not let the story go despite being clearly told that there is no substance to it. Many technology experts, as well as social media users like Sophie Zhang, a former Facebook data scientist turned whistleblower, Shoshana Wodinsky, a reporter from MarketWatch, Alex Stamos, a researcher at the Stanford Internet Observatory, have responded saying the reports are clearly fake and question several discrepancies to the story and the proof provided by the Wire. I also saw an interesting thread by this guy called Pranav, apparently, who works at the intersection of law and policy and tech, right, where he was talking about some of the technical details of the email itself. But this is pretty bizarre, right? I mean, what do you think, Abhishek?
So if you leave aside all the technical details and whatnot, I think the stories that the Wire is running is basically a continuation of the media reporting around India by the Western press in the last, let's say, 8-9 years, right? And the basic story is that not only does the BJP have total dominance in or on the Indian media, but also that it is able to sort of browbeat and control these large tech platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so on. So in this particular case, the claim is that there is this Instagram page called Superhumans of Cringetopia. I haven't seen their page, but that's their name. So uh, they are they often post very critical memes and posts about the BJP, Hindutva, etc., etc. And in this case, 5 of their posts were removed very quickly. One of them was a picture of Yogi Adityanath, and it got flagged or it got removed because of nudity, although there is no nudity in the picture. And so the allegation made is that, whenever Amit Malviya clicks or reports something, Facebook automatically removes these posts. Now,
I can quite imagine Amit Malviya looking at this and wondering, I wish, right?
so there is this meme, right, of Nawazuddin Siddiqui that kabhi kabhi lagta hai apun hi Bhagwan hai. So I think Amit Malviya must have got that feeling for some time that day. So
Yeah.
and he wishes he had such power. But anyway, I think coming back to this case, so they said that there is a X check program which Amit Malviya is a part of, and that gives him such powers. Now, it is possible that he's part of the X-Check program, but officially what we know about the X-Check program is that, or I would say it's the cross-check program written as X-Check, I think. So what this cross-check program does is, I think they have a list of 5 lakh or so super users around the world, where these people are given a more leeway in terms of uh, their posts getting removed or not, right? So suppose you are a celebrity, right? Let's say you are a Virat Kohli or a Narendra Modi or a Rahul Gandhi, right? So obviously you will have a lot of critics, and these critics will obviously be reporting and flagging everything, right? Even like mundane posts. So I think what Facebook did is to make a list of these cross-check accounts which have a greater leeway, that your uh, the reporting against you will go through a lot more scrutiny, and then only something posted by you will get removed. I think which kind of makes sense, right? Because otherwise you'll just be part of, troll wars on these platforms. So now, but nowhere does it say that cross-check users or whatever accounts have the power to flag and remove others, right? Which is the allegation here. Now, I think once that story got flagged off, and then they kept, uh, uh, they followed up with another story with some screenshots, some emails of Facebook top officials, right? Like,
Wait, wait. We should read the email out, right? I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, I
because
think that makes
it's
sense.
just hilarious. It's hilarious. So Andy Stone, who's supposed to be the head of communication, writes, "How the hell the link, right, got leaked? Right? How the hell links got leaked? Who's the reporter not on our watch list? And why didn't any one of you bother to link me up?"
Yeah,
Okay,
so it sounds a very
so
Bangalore bro kind of language, right? Which a
I
PM
mean,
from Bangalore would have
this is like
written.
my best attempt at American, basically.
So yeah, I think these guys have sort of come out and disputed it. I think overnight, a lot of drama has happened. And these guys got someone from Microsoft to validate their claims, but even those validations are being sort of dismissed by a lot of tech experts and journalists. And basically, there's a separate, like the whole original story about Amit Malviya being James Bond has sort of got pushed to the back burner. And now, it's like Indian and foreign tech journalists fighting with each other, right? I mean, I think those who are tech experts seem to be of the consensus that the wire either is doing something fraudulent or is being fed, fraudulent material, while non-tech journalists are sort of taking an exception that how can you even question the wire, which is like the greatest, uh, you know, uh, greatest thing ever in journalism. So, that's,
The best thing is how some people who know better are kind of like being subtle about this, right? I mean, it reminds me of when your kid cousin maybe dances or does something embarrassing at a family function, right? And you're just trying to hide your face and saying, like, let's just get through this, right? Collectively, let's just move past this. I mean, I can definitely say that, if it was some other magazine of a different persuasion, I think they would have had a couple of lawsuits by now, for sure.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I
But
mean,
the thing is, you have to
it's
understand that
ridiculous. Like
Meta themselves
one of the
are on
points
the
is,
back foot, right? In the
yeah, yeah.
sense of their reputation is pretty bad. Whether they are totally guilty of that or not is a different debate. But it's
Mm.
been a constant hammering to sort of establish a BJP Facebook or a BJP Twitter link in terms of whether BJP and Facebook officials are in agreement, or like either by agreement and sympathy or fear that that it's not a level playing field. So I think the whole agenda is that to sort of so the ideal end state would be like you have something like what happened to Trump, right? Like you throw out Narendra Modi or Amit Malviya from the platform itself, right? So I think that's the sort of end state that those who are opponents of BJP would like. But more importantly, I think the whole idea is that um, to sort of show a bias, right? That how India's democratic slide is happening because these tech giants are favoring one side. Uh, and if that was the story, I think it did not need such elaborate uh, sting operation or whatever they're trying to do here, right? I mean,
I think,
simply the narrative is good enough for those who believe it. Like you didn't need all this kind of.
yeah, pretty much. But you know what? I'm also thinking that maybe, just maybe, I mean, people are getting bored of that, right? The bored of the whole,
Yeah.
Modi is a fascist sort of a thing, right? And short of anything of this level of scandal, right?
Yeah,
Where,
but
someone
let's
is
say,
directly talking
no,
about it.
let's
Right?
say
Short of
Amit
that, I mean, I don't think
Malviya
people are buying
has
anything.
this. Let's say Amit Malviya had this power. Like it only boosts his popularity. That look, we have got this James Bond on our side. Like, I don't see any BJP supporters saying, "Oh, that means I should not vote for them," right? Like, how does it change anyone's view is not something I'm able to understand. All it does is, and that's why I'm saying that the whole exercise is playing to or continuing the narrative, right? That the same think tanks and same academicians who write op-eds, I mean, it'll give them one more paragraph to mention and quote in an op-ed 6 months down the line, right? Like, it's not changing popular perceptions, and it's not, helping out or changing, voting patterns, at least. That's how I see it.
No, even from a business perspective as well, right? I mean, let's, like, being very real about this, right? I mean, let's assume that you have a certain line of thinking and you're putting out story after story on that line of thinking. I think we've reached a point where there is a certain level of saturation now, right? Even from the Wire or the similar outlets as well. And though they find a need to amp things up a little more, and which is scary, right? Because it can be like really irresponsible stuff like this, right? I mean, now
Yeah,
this
I mean,
is
if, let's say, and we don't know the final tale of this, but if, let's say, the Wire got easily fooled, or even worse, they did some fraudulent stuff themselves, then I think the net result of the episode is that their reputation, even in their own circles, will be sort of partially damaged, right? And
yeah.
so I don't think it was worth it to target Amit Malviya, right? Like, who is not, I mean, let's be honest, like, no one is really voting based on what Amit Malviya tweets. So it's like bit silly, right? It's not a big enough target for you to justify doing all this.
Yeah, no, I
So
mean, I don't know. People used to talk about this Trump derangement syndrome. I think that's a version of that here as well, right? With the Modi derangement syndrome, where people will really believe anything if it kind of fits the narrative and it suits the kind of spiel that they're talking about.
yeah.
But either way, man, I mean, this is one of the lines reads, "Send me an activity record of the document for last 1 month." I mean, I mean, I work with American colleagues. I've never seen. I mean, Vishal Ganeshan had a very nice tweet about this. He said, like, this sounds like a drunk WhatsApp uncle, basically,
Yes.
right? Pretty much like that, right? Well, but in all seriousness, right? I mean, there should be some kind of a check on this, man. I mean, I feel like there should be some kind of a media watch, some kind of a fine, some kind of regulation on this, right?
Yeah, but
Because
the
see, this is
so-called
silly.
media watch
This is silly,
organizations
but then I mean,
who almost got a Nobel Prize this year, apparently, they are also on the side of Wire here, right? So, like, what can you do? So,
no, I understand, but then even if you look at the broadcasting rules and regulations and everything, I mean, I happened to look at it some time back. I think it's a few lakhs is worth of fine. I think that's about it, right? Unless someone did something really egregious where somebody got killed or whatever, right? Unless it's that sort. I mean, for all of these kind of white lies per se, there isn't much of an impact, and I think that should change. Really, that should change, because I mean, you can't you have to have a responsible media, right? I mean, you can't just throw some muck out there and see what sticks, right? I mean, which is what is happening right now. And thank God for social media and whatnot, that we can call out all of these things. But yeah, this is still, I feel, an egregious violation of basic tenets of media and the principles that they should definitely have, right? Definitely check out those threads on Twitter. I mean, it's fairly easy to find. We'll also link to some of these. But yeah, I mean, it was tragicomical, I should say. Well, that brings us to the end of the weekly for this week. We have an interesting conversation coming up with Rashmi Samant, who is a Hindu rights activist, and some of you may remember her as a former president of the student society at the University of Oxford, and there was some controversy around her views and whatnot. And in this episode, she speaks with Sharan Sethi about Hindu phobia in general, and with aspects of that, definitely check this out. We're going to put this out perhaps on Tuesday or Wednesday. If you have any suggestions for content or certain guests that we should host on the podcast, do let us know as well. We have some plenty of exciting podcasts coming up, including one on the T20 World Cup, right? Which Abhishek Paul will be hosting it. Abhishek, looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, as an India fan, I'm not too optimistic right now with injuries to, Jasprit Bumrah, and then the not so great form of our great batsmen. So, but let's see. I mean, if we can get to the semi-finals, I think that will be a good achievement for this team.
Yeah. We also have another podcast on geopolitics in the Velinas Talk series. This is with Mr. Christopher Balding, who is a China expert. And, given the significance of the whole, Politburo elections and, potentially Xi Jinping's third term and the cabinet and everything, there will be plenty of things to discuss with him for sure. So I will definitely watch out for that. Abhishek, there are a couple of comments on YouTube. Let's just take them. Lokesh Pandey says, yes, there must be a regulation for broadcasting. I 100% agree. I think it is long due. We also had another question, right? So let me just fish that out. Why is India languishing at the bottom of the GHI ranking at 107 out of 121, despite government's recent initiative of Poshan Abhiyan? This was a comment
Yeah,
that
I
was
think
made earlier.
the GHI index is a little like the name is not very simple to like it's not really about hunger. It's more about malnutrition, undernutrition, and so on. And the two indexes where India does pretty poorly is child wasting and child stunting, right? And so child wasting means that so what's the average weight of children at the age of 5 versus what is some perceived correct average weight, and what is the average height of children at the age of 5 versus what should be the correct height or average height of children at the age of 5. I think India does pretty poorly on those two metrics, and I think those are the two which are really dragging India's rank down. I mean, I have seen some other articles which are sort of explaining why there is some data issue also with this, and the delta between various periods has not been computed correctly, and so on. I think Professor Salvatore Babons has some thread on this on Twitter that you can check it out. But yeah, I mean, there are obviously some genuine issues. There might be some data issues, and there is also the question of whether uh, these global standards really do apply for all populations across the world uniformly. I mean, we do know that Indians in general are not as built as, let's say, the Westerners, right? I mean, even in adults, right? So, but doesn't mean that and so there is a question mark, right? Whether all children should have the same sort of index, or whether there should be different sort of indices capturing geographical or racial disparities, right, in various parts of the world. So the third thing is, right, like there's a question on the methodology. But in general, just to summarize, why our rank is low is because we don't do well on these two metrics, right, on child wasting and child stunting.
Yeah, interestingly, they have Sri Lanka ahead of us, right? I mean, Sri Lanka is at 69 or something like that. And I think last year's report had all of them, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, ahead of us as well, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So again, I think the way you read these reports and indices and everything, I think it's there's a certain nuance to that, right? All right. That brings us to the end of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. Thank you for keeping us company on this lovely Sunday morning. And I hope you guys have a fantastic week ahead. We'll bring you more interesting comments, more interesting content and look forward to your comments and suggestions as well. Yeah, I mean, continue to support the podcast. Please rate and review us and share it with your family and friends and whatnot. We look forward to catching up with you again next week. So from Abhishek and myself, thank you. Stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.